Hi, I'm Max Keiser, and welcome to the Keiser Report. Yeah, well, JP Morgan, turns out they own the paper on this studio, and they're threatening to foreclose. So I don't know how much longer we're going to be in this studio. We're looking to go to Asia, maybe Hong Kong or Singapore. If you have any ideas, send me an email, keiserreport@rttv.ru. I'm going to be getting some souvenirs of this studio while we still have the chance, because this is going to be an epic souvenir. This is the famous tabletop. There was a big conference call about this tabletop all night long. Oh my God. What will we all do about it? Let's go to Stacy Herbert. Stacy, tell us more of the news.
Max, actually, I have some news here that really captures the total global problem with monarchs, oligarchs, and the absence of any justice for the 99.9% of us that are peasants. So first, there's an article about a viral campaign in China, and it's "My Father is Li Gang." Li Gang is apparently a deputy chief of police near Beijing, and his son ran over two peasant university students, killing one of them. But because when he saw the roadblock, which was trying to stop the killer, the hit-and-run driver, he drove up to the roadblock and said, "My father is Li Gang," and they let him through.
Wow, I'm going to try that when JP Morgan comes to foreclose. My father is Li Gang. Don't lock the door. My father is Li Gang. We're just trying to do news here.
The other story that totally relates to this. So here is this young guy who gets away with murder because his father is connected to the ruling party. In the same exact Herald Tribune, "Thank you, Uncle Sam." This is from Warren Buffett. He's thanking the government for bailing out all of the banks. In particular, he mentions TARP. So he said if it hadn't been for them rescuing the financial system, there would be chaos and there would be ruin. But of course, we know that Sam is only his uncle. Sam is not our uncle.
Right. Warren Buffett's reputation has taken a tremendous beating because he manipulated the market during TARP. One of his subsidiaries, Wachovia, involved in hundreds of millions of dollars worth of drug laundering from Mexican drug cartels. His cohort, Charlie Munger, was caught telling people on television, "Suck it up, get a job, you loser," even though he's a mop wiper from the gutter who Warren Buffett took pity on as part of some friend relationship. And all kinds of folks. Barry Ritholtz over there at thebigpicture.com just wrote a very scathing piece against Warren Buffett. He's always been held up as a model capitalist, and it's for some people it's disheartening to find out that he's just another financial terrorist, another scum, another guy who's just milking and bilking the public. He'd come on the show if he had some chutzpah, but I'm sure down there in Omaha he stays away from the maddening crowds who will soon be showing up with their pitchforks.
Well, of course, Warren Buffett has also famously defended the practice of naked short selling. And this takes us to our own viral campaign, which is Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver. Now, the reason why we're encouraging people to buy just 1 ounce of silver is that JP Morgan is Uncle Sam. They are more than anybody connected to Uncle Sam. And they've been naked shorting, i.e. selling silver that they don't own in order to suppress the price. So we've been sent in some more videos, some excellent videos. So first one, let's look at one Banky.
Max Keiser has a plan to crash JP Morgan. All we have to do is buy 1 ounce of physical silver. I'm all in.
Good job, one Banky. YouTube revolution. Buy 1 ounce of silver, put JP Morgan 6 feet under.
And here's one which is slightly pornographic, a mama must.
JP Morgan and other banksters, do you wonder how much of this I have? I can only afford to buy it 1 at a time. Keep holding it down for me, won't you, sweetie?
Well, so she's purchasing her silver there every time JP Morgan drives the price down.
There's another series called Silver Queen, which is even a bit more risque. So search YouTube for Silver Queen. She's making a special dedicated Silver Queen video just for the Crash JP Morgan Buy Silver campaign. All we need is about 5% of the world's population to buy 1 silver coin. That's all we need to do. And JP Morgan stock will go to zero. Jamie Dimon and Charlie Munger would be out sweeping floors where they should be, considering they have no skills whatsoever other than extortion and financial terrorism.
Well, here's another viral video and a campaign against JP Morgan in the headlines. NACA's Bruce Marks goes postal at JPM crony during yesterday's foreclosure hearing. So this was when David Lohman, who's head of their lending division, was speaking before the Senate committee headed by Chris Dodd. Remember, friend of Angelo Mozillo? My father is Lee Gang, my uncle is Sam, and I'm a friend of Angelo Mozillo.
Yeah, countrywide, extortionist, billions ripped off, slap in the wrist, nothing, penalty whatsoever, financial terrorist, should be in Guantanamo, government's asleep, Obama's asleep. Forget the hope, we want the real dope!
So here you see David Lohman speaking before the Senate committee, and he's explaining that Chase is trying as hard as they can to help all of those being foreclosed upon in America. And in the background is Bruce Marks, who is the head of Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, which tries for well over the past decade to try to help low-income households.
Foreclosures cause significant hardship to borrowers and communities.
If borrowers here cannot have their perjury, what you're saying is you need to hear from the homeowner. Dave lying, he is lying, he didn't.
So this is what Zero Hedge calls going postal.
Bruce, why go to a gunfight with a knife, okay? You're never going to conquer J.P. Morgan. They're plugged into the government. There's no rule of law that applies to Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan. If they get caught doing something, they pay a small fine, or they just write a new law. They're Pope, the Pope of fraud on Wall Street. You can't touch them. I invite you and your followers to follow us. Buy silver and crash JP Morgan. Every one of your followers, even though they're in foreclosure and don't have, much to eat, you can still afford one silver bullion coin as a part of the effort to put JP Morgan 6 feet under. Wear a red rag on your shirt to personify we will not be foreclosed upon by the friends of JP Morgan. The friends of JP Morgan, you know who you are in New York and London. We're not going to be foreclosed upon. This is my tabletop. I bought this tabletop.
Here's a headline suggesting that the nephews and nieces of Uncle Sam are going to be rescued yet again, and the friends of Angelo Mozillo will also do the rescuing. Batten down the hatches, robo-signer foreclosure scandal may threaten fundamental financial stability. So we know that the robo-signer scandal, i.e. all these fraudulent foreclosures that were done in the U.S. in order for J.P. Morgan and Bank of America to save $2 on doing a legitimate foreclosure. Well, apparently, according to the TARP regulators, the government watchdog, they're warning in their report that the scandal may cause more financial instability and needing the banks to be rescued again. If there's any sort of pursuit of justice, this might cause too much financial instability. Right,
you mentioned the $2 that they would spend per foreclosure to get it done legally. And this is so typical, okay? Why did we have 9/11? Because the airlines didn't want to spend $2 on a lock that would keep the pilots locked behind the passenger compartment of the plane. Why do we have the Gulf spill? Because BP is too cheap to spend a few bucks on the proper safety precautions. Why are we having the foreclosure nightmare? Because these companies don't want to spend the extra pennies to do it legally. And when they get caught breaking the law, what their solution is, well, let's change the law, or let's pay a small fine. And you see, this is the problem. You've got a kleptocracy. Argentina's got nothing on Geithner, Bernanke, Obama. And the people are, instead of going out there with pots and pans like the Argentinians did after they've been disenfranchised and all their money went down the main boulevard in armored cars and they were left nothing with their pots and pans, buy a little silver now, put J.P. Morgan in the morgue.
So this was the report by the Congressional Oversight Panel, and they said that the ongoing turmoil roiling mega banks and their faulty home foreclosure practices may represent deeper, more systemic problems regarding the origination, transfer, and ownership of millions of mortgages, potentially putting Wall Street on the hook for billions of dollars in unexpected losses.
Well, of course, there's going to be, of course. I mean, that's the name of the game. It's deflation as far as the Fed's concerned to give all the money to the folks who have all the assets to make those assets worth more, but they don't do anything for wages. It's a twin mandate of the Fed, is price stability and wages, but somehow wages never go up. And it's a problem, Stacy Herbert. Even though we're breaking this news story globally, friends of J.P. Morgan, moles, are in this show. They're in the house, and we have to root them out.
So just so you see how all of this fraud happened. Remember, the thing about globalization, the thing about capitalism, the thing about markets is supposed to create efficiencies, right? Now take a look at this reverse engineered securitization flowchart. And these are Dan and Terry, and they wanted to find out who actually owned their mortgage. And as you can see, following all these little lines all over the place, there are thousands and thousands of times each of these mortgages are packaged, repackaged, sent here, sent there, put over there, handled by this person, handled by that corporation. Yeah. And each person in that sort of chain is taking a little tiny cut.
Right. That's right. It's a daisy chain of fraud. I mean, if you went to an orgy club in the 70s, Plato's Retreat, today is Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein sticking in every orifice they possibly can with gargantuan quantities of fraud without any lubrication. And the people who are getting suffering out of this are saying, hey buddy, why are you putting so much sand in there?
And then finally, so we've seen that we have a campaign against JP Morgan for the people to buy a coin, 1 silver coin. Then there's Bruce Marks from NACA, who it was in the Senate building and yelled at David Lohman from Chase. And then here is finally the fallout of the AMBAC bankruptcy and its likely effects on the U.S. investment banking and broker-dealer industry. So AMBAC, I don't know if you recall, during the 2008 crisis, they were one of the other insurers, along with AIG, that nearly collapsed. AIG was rescued, AMBAC survived to live and die another day. Well, right. Apparently it collapsed without anybody really noticing. It's gone bankrupt. So it's in the bankrupt process at the moment. But the thing is, they're suing many banks, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and JP Morgan. Right. And JP Morgan is now trying to squash this lawsuit because AMBAC is charging them with fraud of selling them bogus mortgages that they knew were bad.
So JP Morgan's got the AMBAC fraud case. They've got HSBC is also suing them, I believe.
Everybody's suing each other.
HSBC is being sued along with JP Morgan for fraudulently manipulating the silver market. Oh my God, you need a playbook to keep track of all this fraud. All right, well, when we come back from the break, we're actually going to be following up on this and talking about the AMBAC with renowned journalist Terry Boole. Yes. So don't go away. Stacy, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
That's going to do it for this segment. Stay tuned, much more. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Yeah, you know those nasty banks on Wall Street and around the world? The reason we got into this whole global financial meltdown, principally, is because they were involved in hundreds of billions and even trillions of mortgage-related fraud. Now let's go to New York City and talk with investigative financial journalist and Forbes contributor Terry Boole. Terry, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Hi, Max. It's great to see you.
Great to see you again. Terry Boole, AMBAC has filed for bankruptcy. Right. Tell us about AMBAC. Who are they? What bankrupted them? And what is JP Morgan's relationship in this case?
AMBAC was one of our larger insurers of residential mortgage-backed securities. You know, those toxic loans that they went out and sold and told you that were AAA rated and everyone should buy. Well, AMBAC went and sold a bunch of banks, a bunch of hedge funds, a bunch of pension funds, insurance that would say that these securities are great, that there's going to be no problem with them. Now we know there's a huge problem with them, and AMBAC couldn't pay the insurance, basically. So they're failing. They filed bankruptcy. There was a warning that this would happen as far back as March, and I think it's kind of interesting that it finally happened last week. And so the question is why? I mean, what's going on? What's going on between all that time? What's going on with their insurance regulator in allowing AMBAC to stay, let's say, in business for a while maybe they're saying you can't pay off some hedge funds or you can't pay off some other products, while they're allowing them to pay off some debt to muni bonds or to states.
Right. So AMBAC is one of the layers in the layer cake of fraud. So they are the ones who are guaranteeing some of these mortgage-backed bonds with some insurance products. And of course, when you say insurance products, the name that comes up to mind is AIG, who was offering insurance products in the form of credit default swaps, which we now know are not insurance products whatsoever. There's no reserve requirement on these products whatsoever. They're collateralized by nothing whatsoever. They were invented over at J.P. Morgan, I guess, by Blythe Masters. She simply did a witch's spell and pulled some phantasmagorical, nonsensical security out of nowhere and called it, said it had a value. We now know that's completely false. So AMBAC is just one of the layers in the massive layer cake of fraud. And now we've got J.P. Morgan, Bear Stearns, suing, AMBAC is suing these folks for accounting fraud, for acting in bad faith. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, AMBAC didn't do their homework, okay, when they were insuring some of these products. They relied on Bear Stearns and EMC, now owned by J.P. Morgan, to sell them a product that the raters said was AAA rated, and to say that the loans that they're putting in there, they know are going to work out and that they're going to perform. Okay, well, AMBAC has now learned that Bear Stearns actually, according to the lawsuit, knew they were putting in bad loans. They knew the loans were defaulting before they even sold it to them. And this is a story I actually first broke on The Atlantic when we talk about Bear Stearns even falsifying information before it sold it to investors like AMBAC or insurers like AMBAC. So at this point, I mean, AMBAC, let's think about it, in 2008 files a lawsuit and says, okay, we have $635 million of bad loans that you knew about. So you need to buy these back. And JP Morgan's like, no, why? Why do we need to do this? I mean, they did things like, according to the lawsuit, that they stalled the process. They did accounting fraud to make like the loans were paying out when they weren't, so that they wouldn't have to buy them back from AMBAC. And I seriously have to wonder if AMBAC would have been in a situation to have to go bankrupt in the first place if it wasn't dealing with the fraud from JP Morgan to start with.
Right. Well, of course, back in the 20s, before the crash of 29, JP Morgan was involved in the stock pools, which was a massive accounting fraud that contributed to the crash and depression in America in the 30s. So here you have a reconstituted JP Morgan, basically engaged in the same kind of accounting fraud perpetrated on the folks in America, but there is no Pecora Commission, there is no FDR, there is no pushback, there is no rule of law. What happened to the rule of law in America, Terry Boole?
You nailed it, Max. I think that we have a huge, serious problem. What's more interesting is that I realize that this is really Bear Stearns and EMC who started and committed the fraud. But then for JP Morgan to continue to allow it to happen, why didn't they look into why these loans should be paid back? How's this? AMBAC has now filed an amended complaint after my Atlantic story came out. They were able to get a lot more information. They have internal people inside of EMC willing to testify that there was fraud inside, that there was faulty practices for due diligence. They just didn't do their homework. In that case that's been filed in New York Supreme Court, they've decided to seal the documents. They've got a judge to say, okay, you can't see this case because it could ruin the reputations of some of the people at Bear and JP Morgan. Or how's this? They think that because somebody inside of Bear wants to testify that they did something wrong, that those are special trade secrets or trade practices. And I just find that absurd. The judge still hasn't ruled on if he's going to allow them to seal the case. We're waiting. We've been waiting since about August 5th. I mean, what's the whole force, like, what's going on there?
In other words, J.P. Morgan and Bear, who bought Bear Stearns as part of the shotgun wedding of the 2008 $750 billion heist orchestrated by Hank Paulson in front of Congress. J.P. Morgan is basically getting records sealed, and their argument is that our proprietary method of committing fraud, that we don't want to show our competitors our proprietary method of committing fraud because that would put us at a competitive disadvantage if all the other banks committed fraud the way we commit fraud. That's basically their argument.
That's the way I read the case. And so I really hope that other journalists besides myself start to question if this case is sealed, we're still waiting to hear why. Why can't we see what's going on? Why can't we see what's being filed in a court of law?
Okay, getting to this.
It's $635 million. What if it's probably like $1 billion of damages by now, I bet.
Let me ask you this about JP Morgan. What is their liability potentially in this case?
Oh, Max. It's personally, if AMBAC can win, because clearly they sold insurance also to MBIA, right? Another huge, large insurer. or anyone else, or I guess AIG, if AMBAC can win, it opens up all of JP Morgan's or Bear Stearns residential mortgage-backed securities, which were likely, it looks like, fraudulently built. And think about it this way. There are people now currently going to the SEC saying, hey, JP Morgan doesn't have enough reserves. The SEC has actually already sent a letter to them questioning this. JP Morgan does not have enough reserves set aside if they are forced to buy back these loans. And if they had more reserves set aside, it would obviously affect their earnings, Max. Their earnings wouldn't look as good. And that's the other accounting game that I think is going completely unchecked right now.
Yeah, well, this is systemic throughout the entire banking system, is that none of these banks have the reserve. This is why the crisis is there to begin with. For example, the Basel II and Basel III requirements set up to tell banks what they should have in terms of minimal reserve requirements are routinely bypassed. The reason you have collateralized debt obligations, for example, part of the flora and fauna of these re-securitized packaged securities, is to get a rating from a rating agency based on a partial ownership of a government bond to get a AAA rating. Therefore, according to Basel II, they can use that as collateral to ever build more layers onto the fraud layer cake. So it's all about gaming the system. JP Morgan, they game the system because they have no business plan other than gaming the system. They don't really have any business other than charlatanism. That's their business. Fraud is their business. They have no underlying business. What is Jamie Dimon? Jamie Dimon is just a fraudulent excuse for a CEO who commits acts of financial terrorism on a daily basis. They don't have the reserve requirements. JP Morgan doesn't have the reserve requirements. Goldman Sachs doesn't have the reserve requirements. None of these banks have minimum reserve requirements. They're all technically in default. So why don't we just ring fence them, nationalize them, and euthanize them? Get rid of them. Put them out of their misery because they're just a cancer killing the U.S. economy.
Okay, Max, I probably wouldn't go that far, but I think you're about 50% there. I think we need to look at the whole process of if you're going to sell a product, guarantee a product, and say if it fails, I can pay, then we need to take a serious look at our accounting issues. We need to take a serious look of what we allow them to keep on their books and not spend any other way before they're allowed to create a credit default swap in the first place. I'm not saying that I think credit default swaps are a bad contract.
Because they consider their books to be proprietary information, completely non-transparent to any regulator. Okay? So how is that different from somebody walking into a cafe in Tel Aviv and blowing themselves up as a suicide bomber and saying, I can't tell you why I did it because it's proprietary information? These are suicide bankers. How come Obama's not putting them in Guantanamo?
Oh, Max. I always love hearing your point of view, by the way. Of course, I can't see their books. I mean, they do file public statements and everything. I always question what's in those public statements, and a lot of it isn't explained, I think.
They're lies!
But the SEC
it's all lies!
can go and ask them questions. Come on. The SEC could be asking more questions. They should be asking more questions, and I'm very concerned that they're not.
Terry Bull, the SEC is in the pocket of the banks. The CFTC, Gary Gensler, is in the pocket of the banks. You got a whistleblower in London blowing the whistle on all these Wall Street banks for manipulating the futures markets, the CME, the COMEX. They refuse to take this case seriously, even though they've got the smoking gun. They're committing massive fraud. Your economy over there in the U.S. is about to go tits up. And why are you even still living there, Terry Bull? Why don't you move to Europe? Come to a real country.
I still believe that America is the best place to
You're a sucker.
Free markets.
You're
free
a sucker.
and we have some serious problems, but I think we're going to figure it out.
Well, who? Obama?
No, but we do have a Republican Congress now, at least in the House of Representatives, don't we? We have Obama's team gutted from an economic advisor standpoint, right? We have people walking out the door. I do have some hope that maybe he'll wake up and start to ask some real bankers, some real, hey, I'll take a lawyer, but someone who's actually done the job, been in business, knows the street to come in and advise him. Right now he just has a bunch of academics and his friends from, who knows, Harvard, I guess, right? I'm hoping that will change. I'm hoping that he's going to wake up and have more respect for free markets and the American ability to make money and to uphold contracts
Okay, Terry Bull, I got a business idea. I'm going to open a halfway house in Europe for journalists who are naively clinging to the idea that somehow America is going to avoid a downward death spiral into fascism. And you can be one of my first customers. And it's a spa halfway house.
I might need to be.
All right, well, that's got to do it anyway. But thanks for coming on the Keiser Report, Terry Bull.
Thank you, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert, and my naive journalist friend, Terry Bull, who will be shortly arriving in Europe to take refuge from the ravages of a completely collapsed economy in America. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.